Okay. Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. Today is January the 20th, 2026. And we have just heard the governor's budget address on the floor of the House in a joint assembly. And our guests right now are Adam Gresham from the Department of Finance and Management, who will help explain some of the whole budget to us.
I can bring my colleague.
And bring your colleague, Marty Merrill, as well. Thank you, please.
You guys heard the speech, right? Any questions?
Yeah. Pretty straight and simple.
That's fair. Thanks. Sure, thank you. Nice to kick off another year. Guess this will be my 10th. Anyway, what we have done in the past is we have gone through the what we call affectionately the little budget book, and we take you through the general fund overview, which with if you guys are okay with that, that's what I would suggest we do. And that it gives you an idea of kind of the structure of the fund, how we got the money, what we're doing with the money, and then we can go through in any level of detail. So,
And I think we're interested in perhaps where it's different from the current year's budget.
sure, absolutely. So if you flip to page 10, pardon me, of this overview, and as we've done in past years, Hardy and I will tag team. I usually launch in and start with the revenues, how we got where we got. And then I hand off to Hardy, who goes into some of the current services budget, and then back to me for some of the policy changes. So if you're okay with that, that's what we'll do. So without further ado, starting at the very top on page 10, the first way that this differs from other budgets really is this page is quite a bit simpler. If you'll recall last year when I was here, there were a number of revenue initiatives on behalf of the governor. There are no revenue initiatives this year. So this page is quite a bit condensed. It's merely sources. The chief source of which, and the vast majority of our revenue being the e-board revenue forecast, 2.533.5. I always like to remind everyone that the lion's share of that comes from the personal income tax. I think over half of it, or about half. So the personal income tax is quite large. There is some additional property transfer tax revenue, kind of skipping down to much further down in here. That property transfer tax revenue is not from the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. That is fully funded. Where that is from is there's a little bit of money that we take from the current use special fund that property valuation and review uses to administer the current use program. They give us their budget each year, what they need. And it's typically below what they get statutorily in the property transfer tax. So we take the remainder and we put it into the general fund. That's about $600,000. The remainder, $2.5 million, is for the servicing of the housing bond that is outstanding till 2039. $1 million comes from the property tax clean water surcharge, and another $1.5 million that when the bond is retired will go to VHCB, but now currently comes to the general fund. So that's the extra $3 million there.
I'm sorry I'm late. The press was. Thank you, Lady. So a few years ago, we did something with an increased property transfer tax for homes over X amount of dollars. Is that just folded right into the property tax?
It is.
Now it's not separated out.
That's part of the e-board's revenue forecast.
Okay. So what VHCB gets, that's all included in there as well. Okay.
Included in there as well. So moving down from the e-board and the transfer tax, or the direct apps, this year, 108 million. Last year was about 102 million. Most of these are similar, if not exact. The largest increase, liquor was 14 million and change. This year it's 20 million and change.
We had to give them money in budget adjustment.
That's correct.
So now they're fixed.
That's correct.
They basically, their direct app to the general fund was lower primarily to mitigate a deficit situation there. And so now we're on track.
Yeah, good.
So there are general fund sources you see at 2.644. Those are base sources. Everything above there is base revenue. There are two primary one-time revenue sources. One is from reversions that you'll see in the budget, in the language document, roughly $9.5 million. And then the other is for a, ultimately will be sent to the education fund, but that is two sources of one time. One is from the budget adjustment, from the governor's proposed budget adjustment. He set aside, I think it was $74.9 million. So that is, we're carrying forward and unreserving in 27 to, you'll see later on, transfer to the ed fund. The other source of one time is a $30 million temporary reserve that was set up last year as part of the contingent appropriations. Remember, there was 118 million of contingent appropriations. One of them was a $30 million trust set up for federal response to any federal reductions, property tax relief, or other important.
It was the fourth of the four contingents.
That's correct.
We had the ADS, and then we had a 50, a 30, and the 30, and this is that second 30.
And this 30 had the widest use.
That's right.
It specifically calls out property tax relief as
That's one of the.
as an allowable use, whereas the other 30 million reserve is specified for federal.
That's right. That's right.
Which leaves a total of 114 million of one-time revenue. And when that is added to the base revenue, the total revenue that we have at our disposal is 2.759 billion. Are there questions on kind of the revenue component of this?
Okay, if we turn the page to page 11, we'll get into the uses of the general fund revenue, and to Vice Chair Feltus's question about being interested primarily in the comparison between the current budget and fiscal 27. I'm going to walk you through first the uppermost of the three boxes on this worksheet. And what we're doing in the top box is to basically compare the FY 2026 base appropriations current services with the FY 27 cost to deliver essentially the same services on a current services basis before making policy changes. So I'll walk you through briefly first how we're calculating the FY 26 base appropriation starting point. The first number, the 2.319 billion, is simply the Act 27 as passed base appropriations, which is the sections B100 through B1000. And then we're also adding to that the as passed Pay Act appropriations, which are from 2024 Act 113, section G109, that adds 27.7 million. And then I'm adding a number here, which I think I felt was necessary to provide an apples to apples comparison between FY 26 and FY 27 current services. But I think it needs a little bit of brief explanation. This 4.035 million was not actually an appropriation of general fund in FY 26, but what that number represents is excise tax revenue that should have gone to the general fund per current law, but the transfer to the general fund of the balance remaining in the cannabis regulation fund at the end of FY 25 was not performed according to statute with a complete sweep of all the revenue. 4.035 million was essentially left behind at the close of FY25, and this was written into the Act 27, D section language. So the reason for that, I'll try not to labor on this too much, but for 3 years, FY23, 24, and 25, the issue with the Cannabis Control Board was their operating expenses, which were originally intended to be funded entirely from fees paid by licensees to the Cannabis Regulation Fund. That fee revenue was not adequate to cover the operating costs of the operation. So in Act 185 of 2022, construct was set up whereby the excise tax, which was supposed to go to the general fund, was instead sent to the Cannabis Regulation Fund along with the fee revenue. The general fund didn't see any cannabis excise tax revenue in the current year. The Cannabis Control Board used that great big pile of revenue to fund their operating expenses. And at the end of the year, whatever was remaining left after closeout of the fiscal year was then swept by the Commissioner of Finance and Management into the general fund. So it was a somewhat confusing and awkward structure that was in place for 3 years. However, that structure was to end according to statute at the close of FY25. What we saw in developing the budget last year, though, was that then there would be a problem in FY26, meaning that if all the revenue were swept out of the Cannabis Regulation Fund into the general fund, the Cannabis Control Board would not be able to operate on a current law basis. So we set up that construct where we left the 4 million behind, and that's getting them through funding their operations in FY26. However, now we've got to do something about FY27. What the administration proposes to do is give them a general fund appropriation, plain and simple, which they have not received in the past. So that's one of the current services increases, which is 4.5 million in FY27, in order to show this apples to apples year over year and reflect the current services increase, at what I think is the true, percentage year over year. I'm adding that 4 million, even though it wasn't technically a GF appropriation. It was money that should have by law have gone to the general fund. And so I just wanted to explain that. And any questions on that?
So is this sort of the equivalent of one time? Is this a one-time thing, or are we going to be doing this every year now?
No. So this number being reflected in the base appropriation starting point as a starting point adjustment, that's a one-time thing in terms of presenting the budget. What we are proposing is now having a base appropriation in FY27 of 4.576 million. And that will, we expect, unless there is a radical change in fee structures related to cannabis, that now they will have an ongoing base appropriation. One of the reasons we wanted to actually call it out as a base GF appropriation is that now it will, since has been a general fund cost, but somehow below the radar, and just in terms of reducing transfers and such, now it will be an appropriation like every other general fund base appropriation. You'll see it each year. You'll see the percent increase each year. It will hopefully be constrained somewhat, just like our other base appropriations are, and have a target and so forth. So,
Okay. I mean, that's a question.
Essentially, this tightens things up and make sure that we actually appropriate and discuss the money that they're going to get for operating rather than them just using it.
I think it will. And the
We did approve their budgets every year in this committee when they had it. So even if it wasn't general fund money, we approved their budgets every year.
But what I'll add, what has happened is they've been in a real growth mode. And so they've been growing significantly. It's our hope that now with their, and for instance, this 4 million of essentially general fund assistance received in FY26 is going up to 4.576. That's a pretty big number, but that's the explanation for that is they're having this lab come online that was approved by the legislature. And, it's our hope, though, that now they're kind of built out and they're now at the level, we expect them to be, and hopefully not continuing to grow in terms of scope of operation. They've added enforcement, they've added the lab, and now we'll see them as a general fund appropriation year after year. So any other questions on the cannabis? Okay, so there are two other base appropriations adjustments. One called out by Act 27, which said, there was $1.5 million added to the legislature with language saying, don't consider this part of the base appropriation starting point in the future. So there's a deduct there, and there's an add of 150 based on Act 73 base appropriations increase.
And the million
as well.
half was if the General Assembly had to come back because of what was happening in Washington. At the time we left, we had no idea. HR 1 didn't get settled till after we left, and we just didn't know what was going to happen. So glad we didn't all have to come back for special session.
So walking through those adjustments, that's how we calculate 2.35 million as the starting point, as in terms of being the FY26 current services budget amount. And then after this long line of rows of digits, you'll see the next bolded number down at the bottom of the box being 2.489 billion. And so that is the increase of $139 million that the governor referred to in his speech, which is essentially the cost of delivering the same services essentially in FY27 versus FY26. And that represents a 5.9% increase.
Which 14 million of it is ADS when you head out their three numbers.
We'll step through the lines one by one from the top if you'd like, Madam Chair.
I don't think you need to talk about salaries and wages and all, but ADS is kind of a big deal, as you know. But we know about the pension stuff. We just talked about cannabis. Well, maybe I think the ADS is sort of the one that's more unusual. We wouldn't normally see that in here this way. We wouldn't have last year, right?
That's correct. So there are really three structural changes that are happening there within the ADS space. The three numbers to key in on are the 10.834 million, which is the increase in ADS allocation charges that are budgeted within the general fund. The ADS allocation is an amount that's allocated to all agencies and departments statewide. Some pay with federal funds, some pay with special funds, some pay with general fund, depending on how the budgets are constructed, and some are a combination of funding sources. The allocation is the theory behind the allocation is that these are sort of the basic services received by all computer users statewide, and we're going to add up all those basic services costs, things like providing the network infrastructure, things like providing cybersecurity, and the basic storage, data storage, things like that all users use. There is, you've probably heard, starting last year, ADS provide a lot of testimony about how their billing model and really structural budget and billing model was going to be changing quite a bit. The primary change in a one-line summary is that a lot of services that were previously billed out via the SLA or service level agreement model were going to be combined into the allocation, and the allocation would grow significantly in terms of the amount being allocated according to a formula, all departments and agencies, and the specific bills for certain services would no longer be billed in the next year in arrears. The biggest of those being Microsoft, over $8 million of Microsoft products, all your Office 365 used by, really all the state computer users. That would no longer be billed via SLA. That's one of the big ones moving into the allocation. There were also a lot of costs that were simply not being recovered. And the CIT fund, the Internal Service Fund used by the Agency of Digital Service, was growing into a deficit position. And in fact, if you look at.
And speaking bar, uses, general fund impact FY 2026 is past base appropriations 2025 Act 27.
Sure.
Peter, sometimes they.
The life of its own, yeah.
A voice even more boring than mine. I'll try to be, hopefully less robotic than that one. So I was about to say, in the FY 25 annual comprehensive financial report, which was just completed just before the first of the year, you'll find that the CIT fund at ADS ended FY 25 in a deficit position of about $25 million. So that's the evidence right there that there were costs and expenses going out that were not being recovered fully for a variety of reasons. The solution to the recovery problem is now to significantly increase the amount that's being allocated out. And that cost is the 10.834 million that's being borne by the general fund. And that's also being borne by other funds as well. The second thing that's happening is there's now an increase in the direct appropriation to ADS, which was only about $200,000, something of a minuscule token amount. We're now proposing to have a base appropriations at ADS, a base GF appropriation of the $9.08 million. The reason we advocated to have that as a base GF appropriation and not increase the allocation to an even greater amount is due to several factors. One of them being there are a number of services that are funded by the Agency of Digital Service that are a little harder to define whether they're actually a service being received by end users and whether it could justifiably be added to an allocation, especially if you're dealing with federal funds. You have to be able to justify to the federal government, that you're receiving the services you're billing the federal government for. And so some of these expenses that are covered within a direct GF appropriation of 9 million contain things that are artificial intelligence governance, for instance, data governance. There are a number of sizable units that are less clearly defined as a service directly received by an end user that could be justified to build into the allocation and direct bill for. And we were also concerned about some special funds, T-Fund being a good example of being able to absorb an even greater magnitude of increase in that allocated charge, which is certainly a burden for special funds that may have capped sources of revenue. So those are the first two components are the 10.8 and the 9.0. They're offset by the $5.8 million reduction in service level agreement charges that are being borne by the general fund, which represents some of the cost shift into the allocation.
So the decrease is a one-time thing. The decrease of 5.8 million is a one-time because you're just changing what you're doing. So that's one time. But is the 9 million, you're saying it's base, so we can expect year after year that.
Well, actually,
9 million or more?
Well, you're correct, Madam Chair, that we'll see this change year over year, one time. But we would expect the service level agreement charges to remain at that lower level going forward. So.
But you only get to recoup the change once, then it just stays there, so.
That's right. So you won't see
Current
this
services
dynamic.
change is
Right, we
going
won't
to be
see
this
the
year, that's right.
But will we see the 9 million
In a base budget.
in a base budget for next year?
Well,
Yes.
Well, you won't see it as a current services increase of $9 million. You'll hopefully see something like a 3% increase for the governor's, if that's the target that the governor sets.
3% from the 9 million. So it'll be 9 million plus.
But it will be in their base.
Saying hypothetically, yes.
Here, it would show up in their base budget. If you.
And instead of seeing, again, yes, instead of seeing a current services increase year over year of 9 million, you should see 3% of 9 million as the current services increase.
Right, but we will.
Or something of that magnitude, yes. And we would expect that to apply to both the base GF appropriation of 9 million and the increase in ADS allocation of 10.8. We would expect those to both be something like single digit changes, yes, in next year's budget. But this is the year the big change is happening. And again, what's driving this is the a structural deficit position that was existing in the fund. So
A few of those around. Yeah.
3% is the estimated inflationary costs going forward.
well, that's been, I'm not making a particular forecast based on my expertise, of which there is none to speak of related to forecasting technology costs, but that's the general fund increase target that we've set for some years now in a row. We would expect to be setting a similar target, or who knows, perhaps we'll be back to the days of a level funded budget based on the revenue picture. And perhaps that will be the guidance, and perhaps that's where we'll be in FY 28. But yes, I was just giving the example of
What's an inflationary was increase in revenue.
the 3% is the kind of budget increases we've seen based on the budget targets we've set for agencies and departments statewide in recent years. And I'm just using that, saying that that's a likely target for us to set for 28. So you'll see some of, I guess I would highlight some of the other large year-over-year increases are the health benefits employer contribution of $15 million. The retirement plans employer contribution increase of 10.7. And then if you also consider the state teachers retirement system pension contribution increase of 10.2 million, and the Vister's OPEB $13.5 million increase, we're knocking on $25 million related to the retirement systems. This year, there's no increase in the pension plus payment. This is the first time we're now leveled at that $15 million for each system. So, but even though we're not seeing the pension plus increase, just the basic contributions to the systems are still costing $25 million. I mentioned the new GF appropriation to the Cannabis Control Board. That's the $4.576 million. The increase in global commitment, GF match for federal funds, is $26 million. A large part of that is related to the FMAP percentage change, which doesn't have to change very much at all to result in a large change in the amount of state funds. So it's going, we were just chatting with Nolan informally before the meeting, but it's, changing from something like 4.1999 to 0.42. A magnitude of like that can be something like $15-16 million right there. And we're seeing increased utilization is what's really driving the Medicaid experience.
Question.
Just a quick question. Is FY 27 affected by the decrease in the provider tax?
No.
No, it's okay.
Like 28.
It's 20 years, okay.
And then higher ed is going up by 4 million.
Yeah, and that just represents the 3% target that we gave. If you calculate 3% of the FY 26 appropriations for UVM, VSC, and VSAC, you come up with the 4.1 million. Only we're not forecasting a large change in PAYAC GF appropriations at this time, but we'll see where that ends up landing.
And then what's your all other category for $7.4 million?
That's all other. I've just accounted.
What kind of things would be in there since we only have a little?
Absolutely everything in the state that's not described by one of the lines above. And some are up and some are down. It could be costs of fuel, for instance, or operating supplies, or, tend to be smaller items, but their prices change. And, everything else that doesn't fall into one of those buckets, literally. So
It's just hard to call out everything on one sheet.
Oh, I wouldn't ask you to. I just wanted an
Yeah.
example or two of what might be in there. That's all I'm asking.
yeah, think about every kind of operating supply, every tangible thing the state buys. We didn't refer to a single thing. We didn't refer to a single like tangible good in any of those lines up above as an example.
Okay,
BGS stuff would be it.
yeah, yeah, okay. So next,
Other questions on current services before we move on?
scene.
All right, so governor's initiatives, I think using a similar format, calling out stuff that I think requires explanation. Some of these are self-evident, but the first one on the list actually, I think, does require explanation. It's different than past years. That is specifically the fund reappraisal and listing payments. We are switching the fund source for this appropriation in B-139. If you go to B-139, you'll see $3.41 million. Fund source is general fund. We are continuing to appropriate the same amount, but we're appropriating the pilot special fund. Recall that the pilot special fund is the fund that is populated by local option taxes. When a town institutes a local option tax, the town actually, because of your work last year, now keeps 75%, used to be 70%. They keep 75%, the other 25% goes to the state. It goes into this fund, and the majority of this fund is used to make pilot payments to municipalities that host state property. So that fund, the balance in that fund has been building as more and more towns institute a local option tax. And so our suggestion here is to, instead of having a straight general fund appropriation to municipalities, why not take money that municipalities are sending to us and recycle it back to the municipalities? This money specifically for municipalities goes to, specifically these B-139 appropriation goes to municipalities for essentially four purposes. There's an $8.50 per parcel fee that helps with appraisals. There's another $1 per parcel fee that helps with the statewide equalization study, which leads to the statewide CLA or town CLA. And then there's two smaller pieces for $100,000, I think, is for training, listers that need training. And then I believe there's a $70,000 piece for towns that host hydroelectric plants to appraise them and also to potentially be able to staff for appeal. So that's what that $3,410,000 appropriation does. But it's important to note it's all for municipalities. And so the local option tax, which is paid by municipalities, we are going to recycle back to them through the pilot payment.
And there's sufficient money in the pilot to do this and still pay 100%.
Yes, there is. And actually, this has been, when you have our colleagues in the Department of Taxes in.
Yeah.
Andrew Stein and his group have done a fairly extensive amount of work on this. So anyway, that's the nature of that. That's why you see the negative number 3.41. We're not defunding it, but we're simply changing the fund source on it. There's a few smaller appropriations to the military, which they will come in and speak to you about. In agriculture, there's one new position for audit and procurement, where in their business office, they've been pretty hard pressed. There's also a backfill. They're eliminating what they call the LFO, MFO fees LFO is a large farming operation. MFO is a medium farming operation. And those farms pay a fee annually to agriculture, which is supposed to offset the cost of various clean water inspection and the like. And, this is kind of one of the things where we look carefully at our programs and we realize that it costs about as much, if not more, to administer this program, to get out to visit farms, to inspect them, as it does for what we get back in fee. It's a bit of a hardship on the farms. So we're suggesting, or AG has suggested, actually, this is not the first year they suggested this, but they're suggesting that we just eliminate those fees. And, I think it's a good idea. We're going to backfill it with general fund. And
So if you're reducing fees because the costs wash out or it costs as much, does that mean that some positions you won't need anymore?
No, they're continuing.
The function's going to continue. We're just going to be paying with it. Instead of paying with the fees, we're going to be paying with the general fund. We're just substituting general fund for fees.
So you're not deleting,
No,
you're not deleting the function of the inspections and that's.
No, just the fee.
we're now funding it with general fund rather than with fee. And Ag can explain this in much greater detail, but they'll explain that the fees did not cover already the cost of the program that's being conducted. The fees are only assessed to certain farms that fall into a certain definition of medium or large. Small farms receive the same program, have the same program costs, but don't pay any fee. And there's concern about, there's some equity concern there, as well as there's something of a philosophical concern about being required to pay a fee to operate a farm. So.
Like we do for our cars?
So we have that discussion, Madam Chair. And to Hardy's point, Ag will be happy to come in and explain this.
Yeah, another place where the fees aren't covering the cost of running a program. We've already had a couple of those.
The next one down, DCF, they will, of course, be very happy to come in and explain all about this initiative, which is has a number of different components to it. But I think what I will explain here is represents a kind of the first of a 2 or 3 step process whereby we are moving one-time funding into base. And you'll note further down, there is still a $21 million one-time appropriation to DCF to help with the emergency housing program and specifically to help with the hotel motel program. But we are starting to build up our base funding with the idea that we are trying to move beyond to the next step. Instead of what you heard the governor say in his speech, warehousing people in hotels and motels, we're trying to actually build permanent shelters for them. And we're trying to gather resources around them to help them move on and provide more stable housing for them long term. This is a very much discussed topic in this building and elsewhere.
Oh, yes.
But I just wanted to represent to you that, when I started in this years ago, there was a just under $3 million appropriation in general assistance. That during the pandemic more than doubled to about $8 million in base. This is base. And it wasn't a one time, actually, it was just base. So that moved up to $8 million, where it still is in base. And then it was supplemented by, upwards of, I think, over $40 million of one time for a couple of years. What we're doing here is we're taking that 8 million and we're adding 10 million. And next year you'll see that there'll be additional base additions. And what we hope to do is phase out entirely from the one time. It's a stretch goal, but I think it can happen. And the folks at DCF will be far more articulate on this topic than I, but I just wanted to represent that this represents a fairly substantial increase in base funding. In Dale, you'll see the opioid recovery employment. That's called Pardon me, man, did you have a question?
He's gonna have a question when you get
After
say
you're
what
done.
you.
I'm going to talk for a while. So the opioid recovery employment program, that's Hireability Vermont, which is an organization that works with people who have either addiction or other disabilities. So that's for Hireability Vermont. The pretrial supervision, that's an additional that's not the total cost of it. That's an additional 200,000 to add to past appropriations so we can roll out what originally was a Newport, Vermont pilot program statewide.
So we're gonna go back up to hireability, and that's what Tiff's question was.
I just have a, so, in, past years, this has been, I think, 1 or 2 years, I can't remember, it's been in the settlement, appropriation, as recommended by the Department of Health and the committee. This, though, would be then in base, and not come from that fund. I just want to
This
make
is going to be,
sure.
this is going to be a base appropriation. It will not feature in OSAC.
Okay, it will not, yeah, it won't appear in the OSAC. Okay, great.
I'm going to make a note of that and I will confirm with you, but
Okay.
virtually certain.
Thanks.
Green Mountain Care Board, I think you'll recognize they were given some positions in Act 68, and this is predominantly due to reference-based pricing. These are people working on that initiative, among others, but I think that was what inspired that. There's some additional base funding for AOE. This is taking positions that were originally one-time and we're moving it into base, kind of acknowledging that transformation is going to take some time. And we want people to be able to attract good people. So we're giving the Agency of Education the ability to confirm that these people will be there at base.
Sorry, I just have
That's fine.
a, so if memory serves, we made a $4 million appropriation to the Agency of Education, right, for education transformation.
That's right.
So this would be in addition to that. I mean, it's,
I think the $4 million was one time, wasn't it? Or
yes, it was one time.
this is
But we
Well, we
won't have
expected to be
spent
carried,
it.
it wouldn't have all been spent by now. There must be some carry forward you're using for this or something.
guess we can check. I don't remember how much of that was carried, but I guess we could check to make sure.
We were not expecting that they'd be able at all
Please, all
to
of
spend
that.
$4 million.
It was several different pots, like, prior to peace.
Over the course of fiscal 26, I'm sure they are investing in various things. So whether or not they spend 4 million, I don't know. But also keep in mind that would be supporting employees, limited service positions too.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with the amount currently remaining in that appropriation. I did look at it during the past month. I don't remember the amount, but I saw that a significant portion had been spent. Because we've been looking under every couch cushion to find dollars to revert. So I put my eyes on all the appropriations out there. We'll get back to you with an email.
Okay, that's great, thanks.
The VHIP, ACCD, Vermont Housing Improvement Program, I think that's a familiar topic that I don't think I need to repeat, but I mean, this will be our, I think, second, maybe third request to move that into base. We have a lot of like for that program.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
is that an up or down? 'Cause I know they're out of money right now.
Right.
Because they exhausted it. It's been so popular.
Right.
Is there an addition to this over last year?
No, so 4 million was the one-time amount, I believe.
Yeah.
But it was a one-time.
And
And
it's going into the base now?
the big change is that this is now being proposed for the base. So this would be an ongoing annual amount.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, it's the same amount as last year. It's just in base versus.
Different location.
Good, thank you.
Within the one-time appropriations or uses, the DCF, you see the emergency housing that predominantly is hotel motel, but it also a few other things. It involves housing insecure individuals. And the temporary secure youth treatment facility, that is known, that's the Red Clover facility that's currently operating in Middlesex. But we are hopeful of moving on from that facility.
Is that what we're waiting for with the things that didn't work out in Newbury over Jen's? Or is this,
No, that's different. That was.
we need something for
Wherever
that,
Gents was the old Woodside.
Woodside, and then, so we need something for that, and we need something more permanent for this group.
That is correct. There is a full list of the so-called other one-time, you'll see on page 12 of this document. That again, I don't know if it's going through entirely, but you'll notice there's money for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to finish their work. $900,000. There's also another extension of the IDEAL program. Inclusion, diversity, equity.
Access.
What the A and the L are, but anyway, that's a program that, you know, the Office of Racial Equity is very beholden to. They think it works, and it works with municipalities. The two DIVA are the first one is really just costs that are incurred due to HR 1 to try and offset. There's a fair amount of federal money behind that too, by the way. And then there's $2 million, but quite a bit smaller amount than in past years for provider stabilization.
There's 14.5 million in the budget, that's it.
Yes.
So
So
this is in addition to that.
trying to step it down, but also there's some rural health initiative coming in. And so there's a lot of reasons why we think that we can step that down.
Okay.
There you see, as I mentioned before, the emergency housing proposal and the treatment facility. The VORAC grants, that's a program we funded at higher levels over the past years. This is slightly lower level, but still, I think keeps what is a really beloved program going in many of our communities. And the two other appropriations, that's one-time appropriations, that's MEAR, the Manufactured Home Improvement and Repair Program, which I think should be familiar to this body. That actually is being funded by a $830 million or $1,000 reversion from the mobile home condemnation program that originally actually was an emergency board transfer. They used about half of that amount, and the remainder we are reverting, as you'll see, and then we're reappropriating it to the MEAR program. And finally, there's a continuation of the office that we have contracted with Montreal to try to keep Vermont's name out there for Montreal residents. So those are the so-called other one-time. There's only a couple of more that I think to go over. The transfer to the police mobile radio replacement fund. That is a fund that actually you'll see in language being set up. And that is to provide kind of steady and secure, isolated funding for radio replacement, which is a little bit tricky because DPS, you should come in and speak to them. They'll tell you that you can't. It's hard to replace radios on a 1 year, a little bit, 1 year, a little bit. They need to all speak to each other and need to all be kind of circa the same year. So it tends to happen in blocks, and that's hard to do if you just put it in their base budget. It could be spent otherwise during lean years, say, or it could be spent to plug a different hole, and before they know it, the money's out. So if you isolate it in a special fund, you allow it to accumulate over 2 or 3 years, and then you have a bulk of money that you can use to replace all your radios.
So that's what.
So that's why they're setting up.
There was a significant one-time appropriation last year, replaced about
I
half,
was thinking,
replaced about half of their radios. So the idea is we may not always be able to count on large one-time appropriations whenever we decide we need them. So creating a smaller amount of general fund transferred to a special fund every year to fund that purpose.
Kind of like the 53,727, right? You don't want to just wait and pay it once at the end.
And then the last two, I think both were mentioned in the speech. You'll recall that the purchase and use tax that people pay when they buy a vehicle, a third of that is dedicated to the education fund. Currently, the line item is about a little under $52 million for fiscal 27. That's the forecast. In the governor's speech, he mentioned that the transportation fund has available revenue that is used in other, for other purposes, that ultimately hurts the transportation program. Their revenues have kind of flatlined. So we're trying to kind of decouple transportation revenue from uses outside of transportation. You'll remember that we last year eliminated the what's called the JTOC transfer, which wasn't really a transfer per se, just that the state police used as a source of funds $20.25 million of T fund instead of general. Last year, we eliminated that. This year, we're starting down the road of slowly but inexorably eliminating the use of the purchase and use revenue for the education fund. So unfortunately, that's a pretty heavy lift. So we're doing it $10 million this year, and we hope we have a goal. You'll see in the language, we have a goal of eliminating 5 years. So you'll note though, to keep the education fund whole, kind of interesting, our three major funds, they're all tied into this, which is kind of a cool thing. But so to keep the education fund whole, we are transferring $10 million.
When you're taking it from the education fund, property taxes go up.
Right.
Unless you backfill what you're taking from the education fund.
And that's what we're doing.
So,
And you'll see, and this is a 1-year thing.
yeah, but you've got a 5-year plan. So
We got a plan.
see where you're getting the money from after this year.
Got a plan. But I think it's important. I mean, this was instituted years ago when T fund was flush and the other funds were struggling, and that's no longer the case. So yes, you'll see the plan, but we do intend to kind of phase this down. So that too, you'll see as actually the transfer is one transfer of 114 point.
115 million.
Right.
But there's two different components.
Only 105 of that is actually
Only.
property tax relief.
Yeah.
10 million is just replacing
Property tax stabilization.
existing revenue. So
Already had a question.
Well, just to clarify, then the purchase and use tax under this plan will contribute 40 million to the ed fund this year.
I think 42, yeah.
41.9. Yep, 40.
Okay, I'm going to toss it back this way and we're going to finish up on this sheet anyway.
So the bottom box, the transfers and reserves from the general fund, these are primarily, statutory obligation type things. For a few years now, we've been making a transfer to the general obligation bonds debt service fund, as opposed to making a general fund appropriation. And you may recall the history there and the reduction of the reserve requirement that's achieved as a result. Last year, the transfer for debt service was about 81 million. And this year, the costs of debt service obligations are about 77 million. However, there was a balance remaining in the debt service fund of some $3.8 million. So we're only transferring new general fund in the amount of the 73.8 million that you see here. So that's what's happening in debt service. So nice to see that number coming down, moving in the right direction. The transfer to the capital infrastructure fund That amount is formulaic based on 4% prior year appropriations, less debt service costs. So that's where that 17 million comes from. This is the so-called cash fund. So a capital fund that's not bonded debt that can be used for capital appropriations. The transfer to the tax computer system modernization fund is formulaic. You'll find that in the language. This has been 2 or 3 years now that we've been following this new construct in which there are transfers made from both the general fund and the ed fund to the tax computer system modernization fund. And this is the general fund component. And then we've got our 2 reservations for the budget stabilization reserve and the 2753 reserve. And those are formulaic amounts, and they're based on the 2753 reserve contribution is based on the report we provided to the JFC in November. And the budget stabilization reserve is to maintain the statutory maximum amount of 5% stabilization reserve. 5% of prior year appropriations is the statutory maximum to have in that reserve, and we're keeping it full. So if you get all the way down to the bottom line, you'll see that the $2.759 billion number hopefully matches or at least closely approximates the $2.759 billion amount on the sources page proceeding on page 10. And it looks like they do tie out, and there's nothing being left on the bottom line unallocated.
Took it all.
There it is.
Wait,
Just more education. The bonds go through the capital bill, as general obligation is well the same as, do we only have one bonding pot, or is there 2 different, more than one place? All bonded dollars, do they go through the capital bill? Or there's something else?
Well, you've got transportation infrastructure bonds, but we retired those.
Yeah, so there, I mean, I want to say yes, but I'm really not the best person to ask. I'm just the guy that pays.
Just, the reason why I asked is I just wondered if there was more than one bonding process, but other agencies have independent bonding authority or something.
No, that's
Well, there's
not the case. The transportation fund through the infrastructure bond program, which no longer exists, but actually it's still
Well, the program,
exists, it's not bought.
they've got the ability to borrow, but they have not been borrowed as of late. The TIB transportation infrastructure bond that was retired a few years ago. But they have the authority to borrow.
So there's no addition to the rainy day reserve?
The rainy day reserve, there's no specific transfer, but as you're aware, that at the end of the year, actually at the end of fiscal 25, there was about $1.5 million, $2 million of exit. That's after all the contingent appropriations were met. Half of that went into the rainy day reserve, the other half went to pensions. So that's the way we typically will add to
I
that.
thought we sometimes actually put an appropriation, a transfer, a
We
direct
do move
transfer.
to the stabilization reserve, our main reserve, but not the rainy day.
Okay.
We haven't made an intentional transfer, other than the sort of waterfall process at the end of the year in 5 years anyway.
Okay, all right.
So obviously, we're not through what's happening with the federal government, so are we going to be sitting in a decent place in case something comes down that we have unanticipated costs that might hurt some of these areas, or will it wash out?
I think, and that question has actually come up today. I think the answer is we don't know. I think we're as well set up as we can be, but we don't know. I will say that despite, I guess, our original fears, we're actually anticipating more federal money this year, not less. That's in large part due to our Medicaid program, which not so much the number of members is growing, but utilization is growing, and that's formulaic, with more utilization, we get more federal money. But also we are worried, as anyone else is, about federal programs that may not continue or may be cut back. So it's a long way of saying, I don't know, but I think we're in as good spot as we can.
Some pluses perhaps, some negatives
Maybe
perhaps.
so.
Things are up and down, but if you look, to answer the question, I went to page 14 and I found a line for federal funds total in FY 2026, GovRec anyway, which may not align exactly with as passed, but I think it does, shows 3.201 billion in federal funds. And for FY 27 GovRec, I see 3.237 billion in federal funds. So that's a 36 million increase. It's, that's only a 1.2%, but that's a bigger number in 27 than in 26. So,
But the thing about it is, when you think about, we got a downgrade, it was only 8 million. There was a lot of chaos. Things went up and things went down. So even if it's not a very big increase, we don't know what's going up and we don't know what's going down.
Right.
And so the net may be pretty level, but all that happens in between to get from one end to the other, we have no idea what's going to happen.
Some of the money may not be usable to fund certain
Right,
things.
exactly. Exactly. And
Okay.
that's the part we don't know. So we may end up at a nice little number that shows no difference, but we don't, it's like the duck paddling. You just don't know what's going on. Wasn't turtles.
So I have a question.
Yes, Mark.
So do we have a listing in here someplace of our reserves, what our reserves are?
We do.
The current balance of
It's
the.
the general fund operating statement, actually, and T fund and ed fund operating statements too, in this document, where you'll be able to see the general fund operating statement is
page 21.
21.
28.
On mine, I see page 21.
Yeah.
At the bottom, you'll see the general fund reserves. And you can see the reserves in the ed fund and T fund on the subsequent pages. So budget stabilization reserve will increase to 127.4 million in FY 27. Caseload reserve maintaining constant at 91.81. The 2753 increasing to 26.83, and the balance reserve remaining constant at 99 million unless there is unallocated revenue at the fiscal year closeout that would flow to the
Bottom, the last one, the other reserves are going down by 111 million.
So one of those reserves being the reserve created in the Governor's Budget Adjustment Act recommendation.
Right, so it's 105.
Exactly. There's two. There's the 30 million reserved by the legislature for various uses, including property tax relief that we're recommending be unreserved and used for property tax relief. And then there's the 74.9 million, which is proposed for reservation by the Governor's Budget Adjustment Act. And then that would
Which comes from the increase from July,
From last year.
from last year. There was a $77 million increase and you took 75, you're proposing to take 75 of it, and give it to the
reserve. And yep.
I would note, just as a little kind of chest wisdom, the only reserve that we statutorily have to contribute to is the 2753. The other reserves, yes. The other reserves, including the stabilization reserve, they have a maximum cap of, we can't contribute more than 5%, but doesn't say we have to contribute up to 5%. We always have, and I'm sure whoever succeeds me will, and whoever preceded me will, but it's just kind of an interesting, it's just like Vermont is one of the few states that doesn't have a balanced budget.
We're the only state.
Is it the only one?
JFO, we're the only state that does not have a constitutional requirement to balance our budget.
I mean, it's just kind of fascinating.
It's interesting, because a lot of states start with deficits and we don't. We balance our budget.
So, Madam Chair, what is your pleasure? We have a shorter than most years language document that we can go through, or we can come back. I just wanted to know what the pleasure was.
We will need to be done by about 4:15. Are people, do you want to go a little longer? Or are you guys like ready for a break and have them come back? Is this a good breaking point for people or
Four-ish. Like,
4-ish?
Yeah,
So
I think
are we
breaking
done?
now
Are we
is-
kind of, okay. I
Did
think
you guys?
everybody's brains are full to the brim. So we will get you back for the language and then whatever else you want to tell us from the numbers.
Okay, the one thing that we didn't actually mention that was in the speech, and I just didn't want to make sure was he mentioned the UBM
Oh, yes, thank you.
transfer from the Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund.
appropriation.
He didn't mention where it was coming from. He said just it wasn't general fund.
general fund.
It's not, and that doesn't feature anywhere in this document because it's not general fund. But there is $15 million appropriation to the University of Vermont. Technically, it'll go to the Agency of Administration for the ship to the University of Vermont. And that is because in 2019, actually, the Board of Trustees passed a measure to build a facility that could house games and various Sunday recreational pursuits that was kind of 21st century. They put a bunch of money into it and then nothing happened. And the previous president had other priorities like housing within Burlington. And so the trustees for UVM are anxious to move on. They have at their disposal a fairly substantial amount of additional money that will make this happen, but they have been waiting for state to say, yes, we support it. And by the way, here's how we support it. So it's been a bit of a waiting game. But this has the support of trustees. It's got the support of the governor, and we think it's a terrific economic benefit.
So you said where it's come from, the higher ed
So it's
trust.
coming from the Higher Education Endowment Fund, keeping in mind that this fund received a fairly beefy amount of estate tax excess. When the estate tax forecast is set, let's say at $100, anything more than $125 they take in goes to the Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund. Last year, they took in something, I think, south of 30 million, but north of 25 million.
It's about
Large
$27
amount.
million,
It's an
yeah.
unusual windfall, yeah.
So and that money, the Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund is parceled out. The earnings from the investments are parceled out to VSAC, Vermont State University, and UVM. And so even with this appropriation to the University of Vermont, VSAC, University of Vermont, and Vermont State University will get more this year than they would have any other year. So it's a good year for everyone. So we kind of thought this would be a good way to use some of that surplus. Anyway, I didn't want to leave the room without explaining.
Yes, no, that, I think, a few of us heard that and we're wondering where that was coming from. Right, exactly.
As expensive,
I actually met with the president, this person about that, what that
Yeah.
was like about a month.
Great.
But we're sure where my land at, perhaps in terms of what, how much, if any. Just where we are.
Great.
It's good news.
Negotiate with them so that we could get at least a library card.
Discuss that with
Yeah.
Rep. Kaczynski over there. Okay.
I tried and fast and you couldn't get one.
Well, probably not.
Probably not.
So-
I graduate.
Maybe, we'll
Anyway, this.
we'll get you back in to talk
It's
about
good stuff
that.
in the language document too, that I think most of which we've covered, but there are a few things that we haven't that we'd be happy.
There's always a few little surprises in the
the good news is the language document is 34 pages. And so for comparison, Act 27 as passed, if you exclude the 96 pages of the B sections, all the numbers, which are not included in this printout, was 193 pages. So
Yeah.
it'll,
And we didn't.
be a lighter
put other
lift.
bills in like it's been done in the past. We
Yeah.
kept other bills separate. Well, we threw in the T bill, I guess. Dave,
Just a quick question. Will DEVA go through the 26 million in global commitment action? You mentioned 26 million in global commitment.
There's 26 million.
You can
additional.
see where, if you want to see where the ups and downs are within global commitment, this is the GF match amount.
Thank you.
It'll show you in their individual departmental budgets, the global commitment increases.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get you back. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Biddy, we're gonna start at 9, but our agenda is changing after the 9 o'clock one a little bit. I'm not sure where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg.
So, more to come on after the first 9 o'clock, but at 9 o'clock, we have, Dale coming in to talk about, again, what we heard, from Teresa and House Human Services. So the movement of money and all what they're thinking is, so that, how it jives with legislative intent.
How long are they on for, Robin?
Well, at least 45 minutes.
Great. Yeah,
If we.
I've got-
Morning, whatever.
I think that should be enough time.
Okay, you'll be ready.
I got my part.
Okay. All right, so we'll be ready at 9.